How would I play differently versus a fish and versus a pro? I'm gonna take 2 hands and give myself the exact same cards, facing the exact same actions versus both a typical live fish and a typical live pro. Whoever I'm playing against, fish, pro, dolphin, shrimp, I generally ask just 2 questions in every hand to help myself come to the highest EV decision. What is their range? And what happens if? I'm not thinking about range advantage, nut advantage, minimum defense frequency, what would GTO wizard do, or any of that other convoluted BS. This is what works for me, and if you're looking to simplify your in-game thought process, maybe this can work for you too. For context, my name's Marc Goone. I played poker full-time for over 5 years. I started at $1, $2, worked my way up and played as big as 200, 400, and netted over 7 figures along the way. Let's jump into some hands, and I'm gonna show you how this works. All right, first hand here, and we are playing 5, 10, 20, Hold a manager, again, not capable of doing 3 blinds. It gets confused and just puts the 3rd blind as half of an ante. So we're in the 3rd blind here with King 4 suited. A fish opens under the gun to $60, and a second fish calls on the button. The first fish right here is gonna be the villain in the hand. Another fish calls in the small blind, and we are gonna complete with a suited king, getting a nice price here in the straddle or 3rd blind. And we go 4 ways to a flop. Look at that sweet baby there.
Look at that sweet baby there.
We flop bottom to pair. We're gonna check it over in flow to the pre-flop raiser. Under the gun is gonna bet $80. Fish on the button folds, fish in the small blind folds, and now it comes back to us. So the 2 questions I wanna ask in every hand, what is their range and what happens if? So here, let's start off with what is their range? They opened from under the gun, and this specific fish, let's say they do have a limping range. So when they open, it's going to be strong hands, specifically from early position. Now on this flop, fish may not be super aware of much.
That's why they are fish.
But when this guy bets into 3 other people, they probably have a pretty good hand, right? So I'm thinking they probably have some ace-x of spades, of course, some 2 pairs, some sets, some big draws. So maybe like some queen jack of spades, jack 10 of spades, queen 10 of spades. Now let's think about what happens if. If I check raise here, do I expect this guy to fold a hand like ace queen or ace jack right now? Probably not. Fish aren't big fans of folding top pair, specifically on the flop and turn. We can oftentimes get them to fold top pair by the river, but they are going to overcall on the flop most of the time. If they have a hand like ace-x of spades, are they ever folding in a million years? No. If they have a hand like queen 10 or queen jack of spades or jack 10 of spades, a combo draw, are they ever folding in a million years? No. They have a very strong range. They're probably not folding most of that range to a check raise, and most of that range we are ahead of. So now let's ask what happens if we call? Well, if we call here, is this guy going to barrel the turn on a blank if he has a combo draw? Probably. What if they have a hand like ace queen or ace jack? Well, the thing about fish is fish under bluff and they don't bet thinly enough. So if they do have a hand here like ace queen, yes, they bet the flop, but they may not bet the turn and river themselves. They're probably not going to put in 3 streets if it runs out blank blank. And when we check raise fish, I like to use a very big size because I think this is the size that they make the biggest mistakes to. When they're monkey betting the flop and we just raise any size, they're going to fold. But in this specific scenario, this guy's probably not monkey betting into 3 other people. Like we talked about, he probably has a strong range. And is he folding a strong range to 1 big check raise? Probably not. So I like to choose absurd huge sizes against fish, especially when we are deep against strong inelastic ranges. So that's what I'm going to do here. Throw the 3x or 4x check raise size out the window. Never use it again against fish. I'm going to check raise to 500 here, and he is going to call. We are going to go to a turn, which is a blank here. Pot is 1250. And at this point, again, I'm asking, what is this guy's range? Well, he could still have hands like big combo draws. He also could have a ton of ace-x of spades, right? And then he probably has some just ace-x like ace queen and ace jack. The sizes I like here on this turn are maybe like half pot to keep in that ace queen, ace jack, or just a massive overbet to target the top pair plus flush draw or combo draws here. I think I slightly prefer going for the big size. Let's go for gold here. And then if they do call, I'd like to get the SPR under 1 when I'm betting for value against fish. So I'm gonna go for the big overbet here, 1.5x pot, and they call again. So now going to this river, pot is going to be 4850, and we're just gonna have 3K behind. So if we get a blank on this river, we can just put in all the money targeting ace queen of spades, ace jack of spades, ace 10 of spades, etc., and try to get hero called. Unfortunately for us on this river, we get just about the worst card in the deck. Now at this point, once we bet that size on the turn, we talked about we have to carry that consistent logical thread over to the river. We no longer think they have like ace queen off. What do they have now? Well, they have ace x of spades, queen x and jack x of spades. So they have flushes, draws. And then occasionally they could just have a boat, right? And when we talk about those hands now, of course, we're losing to all of that. So can we turn our hand into a bluff? Probably not for this size on the river, right? Probably not for this SPR. So I think our play on this river is unfortunately just to check fold here. So that's what I'm gonna do. We check, he bets 1800. And of course we are going to go for the check fold on this river. But I think in general, I do like going for that huge check raise. I do like going for that huge overbet on the turn, trying to maximize our value against a strong, inelastic range when this fish c-bets on the flop. All right, guys, real quick, if you're enjoying the video, please hit that subscribe button. Subscribe to Hungry Horse Poker. Come up to me, show me you're subscribed to the channel, and there is a chance that I will buy you a Lamborghini. Now, I'm not saying this is guaranteed, but there is a chance that I could buy you a Lamborghini. All you have to do is subscribe to Hungry Horse Poker. Thank you, guys, and have a gentle day. All right, now let's play this same exact spot, except we will play it against a pro. So we have the same hand here in the third blind. Again, 5, 10, 20. He is going to open to 60. Fish calls on the button. Fish calls in the small blind, and we are going to come along in the third blind as well. And look at that, same flop. We're going to check it over and flow to the pre-flop raiser. A pro, in this case, he is going to c-bet $80 into 3 other people here on this flop. Button and small blind fish folds, and now it's back to us. So again, let's think, what is their range and what happens if? When a pro opens from under the gun, they are going to be positionally aware, so it's going to be a tight, narrow, value-heavy range. When a pro c-bets on this board into 3 other people, well, there's a fish on the button, and there is a fish in the small blind here, so a pro is going to be aware, realize he's not going to have much fold equity when he c-bets on this flop, especially when there's 2 fish in there. So what is a pro's range here on this board? It's not going to be hands like pocket jacks or pocket tens or 10-9 of hearts here when he c-bets into 3 other people on this board. It's going to be strong value hands and big combo draws. Pretty similar actually to the fish's range when they c-bet on this board. But now let's walk through question number 2. So what happens if we check raise here, what will this pro do with a hand like ace queen or ace jack? I like to put myself in their shoes and ask, what would I do versus this line? If we were the pro here and we c-bet into 3 people and we had a hand like ace queen of hearts and we got check raised, I would feel pretty squeamish here. And while I may continue once on the flop, I'd be folding ace queen, ace jack, ace 10 without a redraw to the spades on the turn quite a lot. So a lot of the hands we're targeting, if we check raise here and barrel turn, I think are probably just going to fold. Whereas when we were playing against a fish, a lot of those hands are going to call. Now let's ask what happens if we check call. Well, if we check call here and the turn is a blank, is a pro going to continue to value bet a hand like ace queen or ace jack? Of course. If we check call the turn and the river's a blank, is a pro going to continue to value bet a hand like ace queen or ace jack? Of course. Is a pro going to continue to double barrel with spades here? Yeah, sure. All the time. And is a pro going to sometimes triple barrel when they get to the river with a hand like 7-8 of spades or 9-8 of spades, bottom of their range, when we call from the third blind here and it looks like we just have an ace? Sure. The difference between a fish and a pro here is a pro is going to do much more folding when we check raise, but also when we give them a little bit of rope, when we check call on this flop, pros are going to value bet much more thinly with top pair. Pros are also going to be much more likely to bluff if we do not fight fire with fire, right? So in this case, I actually think the best course of action would be to go for the check call. We are going to call here on the flop. Turn is a blank. We check. Pro is going to bet nearly pot here on the turn. And again, same thought process on the flop. What is their range? What happens if? Nothing much changed here. Their range is the same. So I think just check calling here once again works pretty nicely for us. We go to the river. Again, worst river in the deck here. We are done with this. We expect this to get checked back quite a lot, especially if they have hands like ace queen, ace jack. Most pros would just check that back. So we are going to check. And now he bets 700. So what does he have on this river when he bets 2/3 pot? Probably not going to be a hand like ace queen or ace jack, because what is he expecting to get called by? It's mostly going to be hands like flushes and boats. And what does he have more of? Well, if you look at our hand, we have king 4 of diamonds here, so making it a lot harder for him to have hands like pocket kings and pocket 4s specifically. He does have that one combo of 4s, and he's got that one combo of kings. Not even sure if he has 4s when he opens under the gun all the time. And then he's got 3 combos of aces. Okay, so he's got some boats. How many flushes does he have? Well, he's got all the ace x of spades, right? He's got all the queen x, queen 10, queen jack, queen 9 of spades. So he's got a lot of combos of flushes here. If he gets here with a boat, he may be thinking we can have a flush some of the time, and he may get a little bit greedier. So I'm going to even discount the boats a little bit more on this river. And I'm going to say he's just very, very flush heavy. I would say he has a flush here, maybe upwards of 75, 80% of the time. We know what his range is. Now let's ask what happens if we call here. What does that do for us? Nothing. We're not beating anybody of his value range. We can't think of really almost any bluffs here on this river when he c-bets the flop into 3 other people, so he's not bluffing. We should not be bluff catching. Now we ask, what happens if we turn our hand into a bluff? What happens if we raise? Well, if we were the pro in this spot and we had a hand like queen 10 of spades, we bet the flop, bet the turn, bet the river, and now we got check raise jammed with a hand like queen 10 of spades. How would we be feeling? I'd be feeling horrible, and in this case, I would say, oh my God, this is the most under bluff line in the world, and I would be folding my queen high, jack high flushes. I'd just be snap folding these if I was the pro here. So maybe turning our hand into a bluff here on this river when we can discount some of those boats may be the best play. It's just so hard to be bluffing, and you may say, well, what are the value hands? There's not many value hands. Of course, there's not many value hands, but there's not many bluffs either. And if you are a poker player who plays quite a lot of volume live, ask yourself on this river, if you got here with a flush and you got check raised this deep after this action on this board, how often is it a bluff? How often do you see a bluff here? So if we're playing against a thinking player, this is a pretty good spot to turn our hand into a bluff. Now, same situation, we're playing against a fish. I would never be trying to get a fish to fold a flush here. Do not turn your hand into a bluff if you're playing against a fish, because they are not going to fold absolute strength hands. It doesn't mean don't bluff fish. Bluff fish all the time. Just don't try to get them to fold flushes, right? Now, against a pro or against a reg here, pros are capable of making some big folds, especially in under bluffed lines. So I think against a pro here, turning your hand into a bluff is the best course of action. This is actually what happened in this hand. This is a hand I actually played, and I decided to check raise jam the river. Pro tanks for a while, shows the ace of spades. I'm assuming he had the nut flush, and he lays it down. All right, one more hand here, and we will play this one again versus a fish and versus a pro. So let's jump in. We are playing 5-5-10 in this one, and the villain in this hand is going to be the fish on the button. He opens for 35, and small blind calls. We are going to squeeze here in the middle blind with pocket jacks. The button is going to call, small blind gets out of the way. 8-6-4 with 3 hearts here. And in general, my MO against fish on flops out of position is to do a lot of checking. Number 1, they stab too much when we check to them. Number 2, they telegraph their hand strength with their sizing. And number 3, they do not protect their check back range. So when they check back the flop, all of our bluffs are profitable. So in general, I believe fish respond more poorly to a check from out of position than to a bet. And if you'd like even more information, check out the link in the description below to our complete guide to playing poker out of position. All right, so in this case, playing against a fish, I'm just going to be doing a lot of checking. I may simplify and check range here. Now the button is going to bet small here on the flop, and we have a pretty easy call here. Turn is a deuce, we check, and now he quickly checks back. We go to the river. First big decision point in this hand, what is his range and what are we targeting? I think this guy's range is going to be quite a lot of showdown value and air. I immediately lump his range into 2 big buckets. I'm not thinking,
oh, he has some 8-9 of spades.
Now that's just going to waste a bunch of time. You don't have a lot of time in game to make decisions. How do I come to that conclusion? Well, they're probably not going to have a lot of thick value. If they had a flush on the turn, they would just keep betting. If they had a set on the turn, they would just keep betting. So we can rule out the top of their range. So their range is going to be a lot of hands in between, right? A lot of showdown value, maybe some 8x, some pocket 7s, some 6x, maybe some air, right? Maybe like some king highs, queen highs. Why may air not continue barreling the turn? Well, it gets a little bit scared barreling the turn with no equity. So I think it's going to be showdown value and air. Let's ask what happens if we check here. What is the fish going to do with most of their showdown value? If they have 8x, pocket 7, stuff like that, most fish in general do not bet thinly enough. And if they do have air here, how often is a fish going to go for it now that we give them the green light? I think some of the time. But do I think that air is going to get bet all of the time here when we check? No, I don't. I think a lot of the times they gave their one try on the flop and they may just check back here a lot of the times with a hand like king 10 of spades or something like that. Now let's ask what happens if we bet here. What does our hand look like when we check call flop and then check the turn? Our hand looks like a lot of ace king. This may be a way they would play a hand like ace king with the king of hearts. So if I had a hand like ace king with the king of hearts here and they flipped over a hand like ace 8 of diamonds, how good would I feel about making them fold by betting on this river? I would not feel great at all because they checked back the turn, the pot control, to bluff catch on the river. That is the reasoning why they checked back with those hands. They don't want to play a big pot, but they're planning to call a bet on the river. So with jacks here, what does that mean? Well, with our bluff, we don't feel comfortable bluffing. So that means it's probably a pretty good spot to value bet here. So I'd be going really big here. And even though their range is relatively weak, we don't have to worry about the air because the air is just folding if we breathe on the pot. But the showdown value, I don't think is folding even to a big bet on this river. This just shows a pretty important concept, I think. Even when we have a hand that is a not that strong, we can sometimes still choose big sizes targeting portions of the range that we beat. So we have to be choosing our sizing based upon the range we're targeting and not upon the absolute strength of our hand. Our hand strength is not that strong, but we just don't expect them to fold a hand like ace 8 or pocket 9s or pocket 7s here on this river. So I go 800 for the small overbet here, and we get called. All right, finally, now let's play this same hand versus a competent, aggressive pro. Pro opens on the button. Same thing, we're going to squeeze the pocket jacks here. Pro calls, fish gets out of the way in the small blind. 8-6-4 with 3 hearts. In general, I'm doing a lot of checking to fish because I believe they make more mistakes versus a check than versus a bet. Versus a pro, I don't necessarily believe they're going to be telegraphing their hand strength with their sizing. I don't believe most pros are going to be overstabbing on this board like fish. I don't believe they're just going to be stabbing 6-7 here all the time or pocket 5s here all the time. But what does our hand want to do versus a pro? I still like to simplify to either range bet or range check when I'm playing against pros. I just have different reasons for why I do those things. Against a fish may be making egregious mistakes whenever we check here. Against a pro is going to make less mistakes when we check, but I think just checking our range on this board is going to be a higher EV decision than betting our range on this board when we just don't have many flushes, we don't have any sets, we don't have any straights. Same decision, different reasons for coming to that decision. So I'm going to check here, pro is going to stab small, and we have a pretty easy decision to call here with our overpair. Go to the turn goes check, check, and now we go to the river. What is their range and what are we targeting? Well, I think the pro's range is going to be quite similar to the fish's in this spot in that it's going to be a lot of showdown value and a lot of air. So the showdown value, maybe hands like black pocket 9s, maybe a hand like 8x, maybe hands like pocket 7s, right? And then a bunch of air as well. Hands like king 10 of spades, king queen of diamonds. Now getting to this river, what happens if we check? Well, if we check here, I do believe a pro is going to value bet thinly. If they do have a hand like pocket 9s here or ace 8 suited, I believe those hands are going to bet for thin value quite a bit because what does our hand look like? Well, our hand looks like ace high, right? When we check call the flop, check the turn, and then check the river. And if a pro does get here with a hand like king 10 of spades or something like that, well, now they have the green light. We've announced, hey, our hand is weak. They're probably going to bet to try to get a hand like ace king or ace queen to fold here if they have air. So a pro in this spot, if we check, they're probably going to bet for thin value with their showdown value, and they're probably going to bet with their bluffs to try to get us to fold their ace high. So when we check here, a pro is almost always going to bet, whereas a fish would almost never bet. What happens if we bet here? Well, if we bet, I don't believe pocket 9s or 8x or pocket 7s is folding if we bet. So we still get the value from the showdown portion of the range, but also if we bet, they just fold the air. And we would like for the air and the showdown value to bet. So in this situation versus a fish, we would want to bet quite a bit because they're not going to be betting for us if we check. Versus a pro, I prefer checking here because they are going to be doing a lot of betting with both their showdown value and their air. So we are going to check in this spot. Pro puts in a small bet here. And now what happens if? We almost certainly have the best hand here, right? So we've got the best hand here, so we should just be calling, right? No. Because let's walk through all the options. Let's walk through all the permutations of what happens if here. So we can roll out folding, obviously. What happens if we call? We just win the pot. Pretty good, right? Now let's ask what happens if we check raise. So let's put ourselves in the pro's shoes. We got 3-bet. Our opponent, the hero, check called the flop, turn went check, check, and now they check the river. What does their hand look like? Their hand looks a lot like ace king with a heart or ace queen with a heart. So we want to bet this river if we have 9s or ace 8. Now we could check raise on this river. What does their hand look like? Not a flush. A flush would either bet the flop themselves, check raise the flop, or just come out and bet the river. So not a flush, not an overpair. An overpair, again, would bet the flop sometimes, check raise the flop sometimes, or just bet the river a lot of the time. Can't really be a boat. If we get check raise here, this does not look like value. Honestly, it kind of looks full of shit. So if I'm the pro here on the button and I'm sitting here with pocket 9s and I get check raised on this river, I'm kind of tempted to hero call because it just looks so much like hero here has a hand like ace queen with a heart that got to the river and said, I've got showdown value. But now when the pro on the button bets, I don't know if I have showdown value. Let's turn this one into a bluff. So if I'm sitting here in pro's spot with a hand like pocket 9s, I may call. So I think actually our best play in this spot from the hero's perspective is just to check raise jam when we got pocket jacks, and it seems absurd on the surface, but if you walk through what happens if, it can kind of lead you to this decision. So in this spot, I would check raise all in, targeting a hand like pocket 9s, ace 8 suited, 8-9 suited, because we look so full of shit here. All right, guys, hopefully you enjoyed this video on how to simplify your decision-making process and think through hands both when you're playing against fish and when you're playing against pros. Hope this video helps level up your win rate. And as always, thank you guys and have a gentle day.